Are you in a recession right now? And how bad will it get? How will this actually look like for you and America? Is it more than just your investments collapsing? What does this mean for housing? And by next year, will you even be able to put food on the table? Stick around until the end of this video and I will answer all of that for you and more, because look, the IMF chief even warns that there will be people on the street globally unless steps are taken to ease inflation. First of all, let's define an economic recession. You might already know that shorthand for it is 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP, declining productivity. Notice here on this chart that we had a short and deep recession back in the first 2 quarters of 2020. Of course, that was due to the global health crisis when people were staying home from work and not producing anything. Well, that makes sense. But look at the latest 2 quarters ended. They're negative. Talent isn't matched up with jobs, supply chains are still out of whack, and with the recurring health crisis shutdown in China, if those shutdowns continue, well, of course, that affects the world with everything that China exports and that we rely on to import. But then, amidst all that, why isn't the official agency that declares whether it's a recession or not? Yes, the National Bureau of Economic Research makes this call like it's some sort of judge sport, like Olympic figure skating. Well, why haven't they declared this a recession already? Well, because the last 2 quarters are barely negative, unemployment is still below 4%, and portions of the economy like travel and restaurants are teeming with people. There are twice as many job openings as there are available workers. And yes, there's some nuance in all those numbers, but these are the reasons that there's no recession consensus yet. See, the NBER, they define a recession as a significant decline in economic activity that's spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months. All right, that's their definition, and they're the ones that make the call. Be mindful, though, months down the road, the NBER can backdate the recession and say that we are in one now. They have done that before. Now, let's get back to the IMF chief's ominous warning. The chief of the International Monetary Fund told CNN, "It is important to think that this compounded impact of multiple crises is already testing the patience and resilience of people, and if you don't take action to support the most vulnerable, there will be consequences." She went on to say, if we don't bring inflation down, this will hurt the most vulnerable because an explosion of food and energy prices for those that are better off is inconvenience, but for the poor people, it's a tragedy. So we think of poor people first when we advocate for attacking inflation forcefully. Central banks around the world have no choice but to increase interest rates in an effort to combat inflation, is what the IMF chief added. Well, events that have driven price increases, mainly the lingering health crisis and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have made inflation today our biggest enemy. She went on to say, this year is tough, next year tougher. Why? Because of a shock upon shock upon shock. In just a short 3 years, the health crisis, not over yet, the war, Russia's invasion pushing energy and food prices up, and then this result is this cost of living crisis. Okay, that's the end of what the IMF chief said. Well, what are we doing in the U.S.? Jay Powell jacked up a 3-pointer and nailed it. We knew it was coming with his 3rd consecutive 0.75% federal funds rate increase. He's kind of more like a Steph Curry than a Shaquille O'Neal. You can hope for air balls all that you want, but in order to quell persistent inflation, expect these field goals, if you will, to keep raining down at their next meeting, which is on November 2nd. The Fed is jacking up rates faster than at any time since the early 1980s, and it's important for you to understand that the rate that Powell hiked up there, that does not move long-term mortgage rates in direct lockstep. The Fed funds rate moving up 0.75% does not mean that long-term mortgage rates go up 0.75%. But yes, there's still a positive correlation. It does put more upward pressure on mortgage rates. Now, historically, the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is about 1.8% higher than the 10-year T-note yield. That's the gap. That's the relationship to watch. And currently, the gap between those two is 2.8%. That should compress over time. Now, that's just one of a few things that can hold down 30-year mortgage rates, but there really aren't too many things holding that down right now. And it's only holding it down somewhat. And sorry about that visual on a Federal Reserve chairman in an NBA tank top. I'll do better than that next time. Hey, go ahead and put a YouTube like on this video if you like the topic that we're engaged in today. I'm about to discuss what's going on specifically in America. I'd really appreciate the like. Most Fed officials expect rates to rise even more in 2023, not coming back down until 2024. They expect the unemployment rate to rise from 3.7% today up to 4% by the end of 2023. So the Fed is saying that we would rather have a recession than inflation. And it isn't just in the US. The world's central banks are jacking up rates, hence this global recession prospect. Despite all the interest rate increases, it takes time to trickle through. Inflation is still high, and importantly, it's higher than the wage growth of about 5% that Americans have had lately. So when inflation is higher than your wage increase, you experience a diminishment of your purchasing power and your quality of life suffers. Even if you have more dollars, each one of those dollars is worth that much less. And that's why higher prices for gas and food and rent are really stinging people, and it disproportionately stings people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. Now, the FedEx CEO warned of a worldwide recession. And see, a slowdown in a place like FedEx, that can be deemed as an economic bellwether. Less shipping activity can mean a slower economy. FedEx warned of weakening global shipping demand in a preliminary earnings report recently, and that left the market scrambling to determine whether those problems reflect internal company shortcomings or a broader economic diagnosis. All these types of stories can shake consumer and investor sentiment. And what do consumers think? Well, one of the most respected consumer sentiment indices is maintained by the University of Michigan. You see this one cited pretty often, and it shows that consumers believe that the economy is getting worse. All right, well, why does it matter what people think that aren't even educated on these topics potentially? Well, isn't what matters what really is? Well, actually, what people think matters, because look, if people think that the economy is getting worse and job layoffs loom, well, then what people will do is they will hold back on purchasing something major like a new car or new furniture. And if they need a loan for a new car, these higher interest rates are going to make it less affordable, even if they do want the car. Well, they're diminishing their standard of life, their quality of living. Hey, looks like a recession. But if you postpone a car purchase just based on fear of the future, well, then that comes to life. That actually slows economic activity. So when people don't buy cars, well, then those that produce cars are going to get laid off, and there you go. The economic recession came to fruition. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is why you and your actions that you take every day, they actually do help determine whether we have an economic recession or not. Yes, your decisions, from whether or not you decide to buy a new oven and range, or whether you choose to invest dollars or instead store dollars in a savings account. It's those types of decisions. Now, purchases of goods like appliances and furniture, they have dropped. All right, that makes sense because people focused on that type of stuff when they were homebound during the health crisis. But see, spending on services like airline trips and dinners out, those sorts of things, that's where spending keeps rising, and that indicates that millions of consumers are venturing out more. That's good for the economy. So even as the economy shrank over the first half of this year, employers did add 2.7 million jobs, and that is more than in most entire years before the health crisis struck. In August, the economy added 315,000 more jobs. So robust hiring and exceedingly low unemployment, those things are hardly consistent with the recession. All right, so what then are some signs of an impending recession? Like, where can you actually look out for these in the future? The clearest signal that a recession is underway is a steady rise in job losses and a surge in the unemployment rate. If you're an American or you're a Canadian and you're watching this, you're going to be able to put food on the table if we have a recession. America has this incredibly fortuitous geography of a giant navigable waterway, especially the Mississippi River, overlaying our Great Plains breadbasket. You are not going to starve. People have been predicting the end of the world since the beginning of the world. We had a deep recession during the global financial crisis of 2008 to 2009, and Americans were putting food on the table then. Few economists think that things will even get that bad as they did there almost 15 years ago. Recessions are a normal part of the business cycle. If you look long term, historically, they occur on average every 5 years. And in a recession, the best places for you to invest in, classically, are in necessities like food, healthcare, housing, and maybe energy, because these are things that people need in good times and bad times. And I say maybe energy because an economic slowdown often means less energy consumption. Well, we discuss real estate investing a lot on this platform, and when we look at housing in a recession, it is history over hunches. Well, let's look at history. Here you see the nominal median sale price of homes. Gray areas are recessions. Housing sure went down substantially during the global financial crisis almost 15 years ago. That was a special event. That was almost a housing and mortgage-centric recession. We don't have distressed homeowners today. So outside of that one deeply troubling event, housing prices are resilient during recessions. And again, it's something that you and all 335 million Americans need to have. What about other clues? What do mortgage interest rates usually do during recessions? What do you think? Do you think they rise or they fall? They tend to fall, not rise. Recessions correlate with falling rates, and that's something that you might not have realized. Because Americans carry a lot of debt, in a recession, they need help from the powers that be by paying less interest on everything from mortgages to automobiles to credit cards. Well, do you personally believe that we're in a recession already or that we're headed for one? Please leave a comment. I'll read it personally. Tell me if you believe that a recession is imminent or not and the reasons why. I'm Keith Weinhold. I'll see you in the next video.